Captain Elena Reyes gripped the helm as the console sparked, the view screen fracturing into static bursts of alien fire. "Evasive maneuvers, now!" she barked, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. The bridge of the UNS Vanguard shuddered, inertial dampeners whining under the strain as plasma bolts raked the hull. Jax Harlan, her chief engineer, slid into the auxiliary station beside her, grease-streaked face lit by the red emergency glow. "Shields at 30%, Cap. That manageable nest the Council promised? It's a goddamn hive." His fingers flew across the patched-together panel, rerouting power from life support to the forward arrays. The ship lurched, dodging a fresh salvo that lit the void like fractured lightning. From the comms nook, Lieutenant Mira Voss patched in from the lower decks, her transmission crackling with urgency. "Hull breach in engineering. Sealing it, but we've lost 2 crew already. Sensors show at least 20 hostiles closing, insectoid signatures, burrowing through the debris field." Mira's tone stayed level, cautious as ever, but Reyes caught the edge. They'd been sold a lie. The planetary survey team had vanished weeks ago, dismissed as overcautious by the brass back on Earth. Now orbiting this forsaken rock called Epsilon 9, the truth clawed its way out. Reyes punched the thrust controls, the Vanguard's engines roaring to life. They were humans, stubborn, adaptive, and she'd be damned if they'd roll over for some oversized bugs. But as another impact rocked the deck, sending tools skittering, she knew this was just the opening salvo. The real fight was inbound, and the Council's obituary was writing itself in blood. Reyes gripped the armrests as the Vanguard shuddered, the hull groaning under the strain of evasive maneuvers. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, painting the bridge in red strobes that danced across Mira's focused face. She hunched over her console, fingers flying across holographic displays, rerouting power from non-essentials to shields. "Captain, incoming. Vector. 3 hostiles breaching the outer debris ring. They're tunneling fast using the wreckage as cover." Mira's voice cut through the din, precise despite the sweat beading on her brow. She was the steady one, always calculating odds, but Reyes saw the flicker in her eyes. Doubt creeping in. "Lock phasers on their signatures, fire at will." Reyes barked the order, her mind racing through contingencies. The ship was a relic, built for surveys, not skirmishes, but humans didn't yield ground without a fight. She glanced at the empty stations, Jenkins and Lee gone, vented into the void during the first ambush. Their loss hung like a shadow, sharpening every decision. The deck lurched as phaser banks hummed to life, lancing blue fire into the drifting hulks of ancient satellites. One hostile silhouette burst apart in a spray of chitin and plasma, but the others swarmed closer, their burrowing drills whining through the comms like distant screams. Impact after impact hammered the shields, each one draining the grid a little more. Mira swiveled in her chair, her cautious nature pushing through. "Shields at 60%. If we stay in orbit, they'll overwhelm us. Suggest a slingshot maneuver. Use Epsilon 9's gravity to sling us toward the asteroid belt. Buy time to regroup." Reyes nodded sharply, trusting Mira's math over blind aggression. "Do it. Plot the course." She hit the intercom, voice steady for the remaining crew. "All hands. Brace for high G burn. We're not dying up here." Engines thundered as the Vanguard dove toward the planet's hazy atmosphere, the pull of gravity whipping them into a controlled spiral. The hostiles pursued, their insectoid forms glinting in the sensor feed, segmented bodies armored like living tanks, mandibles snapping at the edges of the debris. One latched onto a trailing antenna, shearing it clean with a screech that vibrated through the bulkheads. "They're adapting," Mira muttered, her fingers pausing on the controls. "Look, shifting formation. Not mindless drones. Coordinating." The words landed like a gut punch. Reyes leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the feed. The bugs weren't just swarming. They were herding, cutting off escape vectors with eerie precision. The Council's intel had called them manageable pests, but this felt like a hive mind at war. A proximity alert screamed, another boarder slamming into the ventral hull. Sparks erupted from a panel near Reyes's feet, and the lights flickered. Engineering, she shouted into the comm. No response. Torres, their wiry mechanic with a knack for jury rigs, was down there alone now. Mira's console lit up with warnings. Hull breach in Bay 3, sealing it off, losing auxiliary power. Rhea slammed her fist on the armrest. The plan was fraying already, gravity's embrace turning into a trap as the hostiles matched their descent. She could almost hear the Council's smug reports back home. Another expendable mission. But she wasn't expendable. None of them were. Override the safeties, Rhea said, her voice low and resolute. Full burn on auxiliaries. We'll scrape Atmo if we have to. Shake these bastards off. Mira hesitated, her cautious streak flaring. That risks structural failure. The debris field below. Now, Mira. Reyes met her gaze, the weight of command bridging the gap. Mira nodded, inputting the commands with a grim set to her jaw. The Vanguard plunged deeper, flames licking the edges of the viewports as they kissed the upper atmosphere. The hostiles faltered, their forms buffeted by turbulence they couldn't match. One peeled away, tumbling into the void, but the others clung tenaciously, drills biting into the shields. In the chaos, Reyes spotted a flicker on the long-range scan. A faint signal from the surface buried under Epsilon 9 storms. The lost survey team's beacon? Or a lure? No time to wonder. They had to survive the drop first. The ship bucked wildly, inertial dampeners straining, and Reyes tasted blood from a bitten lip. Humans built for this, adapt or die. And they would adapt. The Vanguard shuddered as it pierced the roiling clouds of Epsilon 9, gravity's pull yanking at the hull like a vengeful hand. Reyes gripped the armrests, her knuckles whitening, while Mira's fingers danced over the console, rerouting power to the ventral thrusters. Shields at 60%, she reported, her voice steady despite the alarm klaxons wailing. Those drills are chewing through faster than projected. Reyes scanned the tactical display, the hostiles' icons swarming like angry hornets. 3 remained, their biomechanical forms twisting through the storm winds with unnatural precision. Not machines, not quite. Something evolved in the gas giant's shadows, hungry for metal and marrow. The Council's brief had called them manageable pests, but up close they were nightmares given form. Evade left, Reyes ordered, her tone clipped. Mira, vent plasma from the exhaust ports, make it look like we're venting atmosphere, draw them in. She hesitated for a split second, eyes flicking to her. That'll light us up like a flare. Risky. Riskier than letting them core us? Reyes met her gaze, the bridge lights casting harsh shadows across her scarred face. Mira was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but Reyes thrived on the edge. She'd follow, she always did. The ship rolled, thrusters firing in a burst of blue fire. The lead hostile lunged, its drill-tipped appendages gleaming through the viewport haze. Then the plasma vented, a brilliant cascade that mimicked a hull breach. The creature dove straight into it, sensors fooled by the illusion. Its form ignited, carapace cracking under the superheated gas, spiraling away in a trail of molten debris. Got one, Mira said, a grim smile breaking through. But the other two adapted, peeling off to flank from below. Alarms spiked again, hull integrity dropping. Reyes unstrapped, moving to the secondary station. Jam their comms. If that's a survey team beacon down there, we need it clear. The signal from the surface pulsed faintly, a lifeline amid the lightning-veined storms. Her old squad, lost months ago on this rock. Or what was left of them. Mira nodded, fingers flying. Static crackled over the speakers as she flooded the frequencies with white noise. The hostiles faltered, their coordinated dance breaking into erratic jerks. One slammed into the shields, the impact rattling teeth, but it bounced off, disoriented. The ship dropped lower, terrain rushing up, jagged obsidian spires piercing the acidic rain. Touchdown in 30, Mira announced. But we're blind on the surface scan. Storm's too thick. Reyes leaned in, plotting a manual descent vector. Humans didn't have the aliens' innate navigation. They had gut instinct and sheer will. We punch through. Aim for that beacon's grid. If it's bait, we'll spring it together. The Vanguard groaned, winds buffeting the frame as they skimmed a ridgeline. A hostile grazed the underbelly, sparks flying, and Reyes felt the deck tilt. Mira cursed under her breath, compensating with auxiliary boosters. They were committed now. No pulling up without shredding the hull. Contact loomed. The ground a blurred mosaic of shadow and fury. Reyes braced, whispering a silent vow. Adapt or die. And dying wasn't on the menu. The hull shuddered as the Vanguard kissed the surface. Acidic rain hissing against the reinforced plating like 1,000 serpents striking stone. Reyes gripped the console, her knuckles white, as the ship settled into a crouch amid jagged obsidian spires that clawed at the storm-lashed sky. Alarms blared a staccato rhythm, hull integrity at 80%, environmental seals holding but straining. Mira killed the engines with a decisive flip, plunging them into relative silence broken only by the patter of corrosion outside. Status? Reyes barked, unstrapping and hauling herself toward the gear lockers. Her boots magnetized to the deck with a faint click, a habit from zero-G drills that felt absurdly grounding now. Mira swiped through holograms flickering on her panel, her face illuminated in stark blue. Beacons live 2 clicks east. But sensors are fried. Storm's EMP pulses are scrambling everything. We've got partial life support, but if that rain breaches a seam... She trailed off, grabbing her enviro suit from the rack. Brave as ever, no panic in her voice, just the quiet edge of someone who'd stared down worse. Reyes nodded, snapping her helmet seals into place. The air recyclers hummed to life, tasting metallic on her tongue. Lena, you up? Comms check. From the engineering bay, Lena's voice crackled through the intercom, laced with her usual wry bite. Up and cursing, Captain. Our power's rerouted, but the landing struts are bent like pretzels. We're not flying out without a miracle. Or a tow from the Council fleet that ain't coming. 3 of them. Reyes, the steady tactician with a scar across her jaw from a boarding skirmish. Mira, the pilot whose quick hands had saved their hides more times than she could count. Lena Torres, the engineer whose wit masked a caution born of too many close calls. No room for more in this tin can, no need for heroes or villains, just survival. They cycled the airlock in tense unison, the outer door grinding open to unleash a gale of stinging vapor. Reyes stepped out first, visor fogging briefly before auto-wipers cleared it. The ground was a treacherous mosaic of volcanic glass and bubbling tar pits, the beacon signal pulsing like a distant heartbeat through her HUD. Formation. Mira on point, Lena covering flanks. Eyes on those shadows. Intel said manageable fauna, but I've seen what that means. Mira led, her rifle slung low, scanning the ridgeline where bioluminescent vines writhed like living tripwires. The storm masked sounds, but Reyes caught a low rumble, not thunder, something massive shifting in the murk. They pushed forward, boots crunching over brittle crust that cracked to reveal acidic underbelly. Lena muttered updates, radiation spiking. Suits at 90% integrity. If we don't grab that data core and bug out, we're cooked. Half a click in, the plan frayed. Mira raised a fist, halting them at the edge of a ravine. Below, the beacon squatted on a pedestal of fused rock, its light cutting through the haze like a defiant lighthouse. But guarding it, crouched low, scales glistening, were 3 of the natives, hulking insectoid things with mandibles that clicked in rhythmic challenge. Not the scattered scavengers Intel promised, but a pack, coordinated, their eyes glowing with predatory focus. Ambush formation, Reyes whispered into the comm. Flank and suppress. Lena, EMP grenade on my mark. Disrupt their carapace fields. Mira nodded, circling left with predatory grace while Lena prepped the charge, her hands steady despite the cautious flicker in her eyes. They moved like a well-oiled unit, humans against the alien tide, but the lead creature lunged sooner than expected, its claws raking the air where Mira had been a heartbeat before. She rolled, firing a burst that scorched its flank, but the others surged, forcing Reyes to backpedal as acidic spittle sizzled her boot plating. "Mark!" she shouted. Lena hurled the grenade. It arced through the rain, detonating in a pulse of blue fire that staggered the pack. The beacon was clear for a moment. Reyes sprinted forward, jacking into the core with a portable decryptor. Data streamed. Council logs, falsified scans, proof the manageable threat was a full infestation. But as the files downloaded, the creatures recovered, their hides crackling with residual energy. One slammed into Lena from the blind side, sending her sprawling. Her suit tore at the shoulder, alarms wailing in Reyes's earpiece. "Lena, hold on, seal breach." Mira laid down cover fire, her shots precise, buying seconds as Reyes yanked the core free. She dragged Lena back, her faceplate smeared with blood from a gash, but she grinned through the pain. Told you. Caution pays. Get us out. They retreated under a hail of claws and venom, the storm swallowing their pursuers' roars. Back at the Vanguard, Reyes patched Lena's suit in the medbay, the ship's lights flickering as power dipped. The data burned in her pocket, a mistake the Council would pay for, but the cost lingered, one injured, hull weakening, and the pack's howls echoing closer. Adapt or die indeed. Reyes gripped the console edge as the Vanguard shuddered, the deck plates groaning under another surge from the failing reactor. Sparks danced across the panels, and the air hummed with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Lena lay strapped to the med table nearby, her breathing steady but shallow, the sealant foam on her shoulder already cracking under the ship's vibrations. Power at 40%, Mira reported from the pilot's seat, her fingers flying over the controls. She didn't look up, her voice clipped like a blade. Those howls are closing. Scans show the pack splitting, flanking us from the nebula's edge. Reyes nodded, though she couldn't see it. She patched the last relay into the core they'd salvaged, the alien tech warm and pulsing against her gloves. It wasn't human design, jagged conduits like veins glowing with an inner blue fire. But the Council's brief had sworn it would mesh. Integrate now, she muttered to the AI. The ship lurched as energy flooded in, lights stabilizing for a heartbeat before flickering again. Too volatile. It was fighting the interface like a wild animal. Lena stirred, wincing as she propped herself up. What's the play? We can't outrun them on fumes. Mira banked hard, the stars wheeling outside the viewport. A shadow flickered on the long range, a cluster of the creatures, their biomechanical hides blending with the gas clouds. Council said the nebula's currents would scatter them. But they're adapting faster than Intel predicted. Reyes, that core, can it give us a burst? She yanked a diagnostic wire free, sweat beading under her suit. The core whirred louder, sinking in fits. Maybe. If I reroute the auxiliary banks, we could punch through the dense fog ahead. But it'll overload the shields, any hit, and we're venting Atmo. Do it, Lena said, swinging her legs over the table's edge. She tested her arm, grimacing but standing tall, the cautious edge in her eyes sharpening to resolve. Better a gamble than waiting for claws on the hull. Reyes hesitated, fingers hovering. The Council's report echoed in her mind. Manageable threat, low aggression profile. Lies all of it, costing them blood already. She slammed the override, and the core surged, blue light flooding the bridge. The Vanguard leaped forward, engines roaring as they dove into the nebula's heart. Alarms blared almost immediately. Contact! Mira shouted. One of the pack broke through, slamming into the port side. The impact rattled Reyes's teeth, and a seam in the bulkhead hissed steam. Shields dropped to critical. The creature's venom corroded the outer plating, eating through like acid on flesh. Lena grabbed a harness rifle from the rack, her movements deliberate despite the pain. Mira, evasive. Zig left on my mark. She aimed through the viewport, firing a burst that lit the void. The shots glanced off the beast's hide, but it recoiled, buying them space. Reyes braced against the console, recalibrating on the fly. The core was destabilizing, feedback looping into the human systems. She improvised, splicing a coolant line from the medbay reserves. Crude, but it stemmed the surge. Holding 30 seconds to clear the fog, the pack howled through the comms, a digital screech that clawed at their ears. Another struck, this one from below, its talons screeching along the belly. The ship spun wildly, gravity flickering as inertial dampers strained. Mira wrestled the controls, her knuckles white. They're learning our pattern. Lena fired again, her shot piercing an eye cluster. The creature thrashed away, trailing ichor that sparked against the nebula's particles. Mark! The Vanguard veered, emerging from the dense cloud into clearer space but not unscathed. A final graze from the leader's tail had torn a gash in the engineering bay, atmosphere whistling out. Reyes sealed the breach with an emergency patch, her hands shaking. Power stabilized at 60%, the core humming in uneasy truce. Mira eased off the throttles, scanning for pursuit. The pack had fallen back, silhouettes fading into the gas. Lena slumped against the wall, rifle lowering. We bought time. But that was too close, their numbers are growing. Reyes met her gaze, the weight of the data chip in her pocket heavier now. The Council's mistake wasn't just intel. It was a trap, drawing humans into a hunt. Next jumps to the relay station. We exposed them there. Mira glanced back, her witty spark dimmed by fatigue. And if the pack follows? Then we fight smarter, Reyes said, voice steady. The stars stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving. Reyes gripped the console as the ship shuddered into the relay station's docking bay, the clamps locking with a metallic groan that echoed through the hull. The station loomed outside the viewport, a skeletal wheel of alloy and flickering lights orbiting a nameless gas giant, its corridors a neutral ground for traders and fugitives alike. Mira cut the engines, her fingers lingering on the controls, sweat beading on her forehead despite the recycled air. "Scans clear," she said, voice tight. No hostiles in the immediate bays. But that pack, they could slip in quiet if they're clever. Lena nodded, slinging her rifle over her shoulder and checking the power cell with a practiced flick. She was the cautious one, always double-checking angles, her eyes scanning shadows even in the ship's dim glow. "We move fast. Get to the comms array, upload the data, and ghost before anyone notices. Council's got ears everywhere here." Reyes pulled the chip from her pocket, its edges worn from her thumb's constant worry. The data it held, logs of the Council's falsified reports, the deliberate underestimation of the Xenopac's aggression, could unravel their web. But exposing it meant painting a target on their backs, and the relay was a powder keg of alliances. She stood, rolling her shoulders to shake off the adrenaline crash. "I'll handle the upload. You two cover the approaches. No heroics." They slipped through the airlock, the station's artificial gravity pulling at them like an old habit. The corridors hummed with distant voices, traders haggling in clipped tongues, maintenance bots whirring past. Reyes led, her boots echoing softly on the grated floor, the chip clutched in her fist. Mira flanked her, her wit a shield against the unknown. She'd crack a joke to diffuse a standoff, but right now her silence spoke volumes. Halfway to the array, a klaxon blared, red lights pulsing along the walls. Lena froze, rifle snapping up. "Breach alert. That's not us." Mira cursed under her breath, pulling Reyes into an alcove as armored figures rounded the corner. Council enforcers, their visors reflecting the strobing glow, weapons trained ahead. "Patrol. They're sweeping for something. Or someone." The group pressed against the bulkhead, hearts pounding in sync. Reyes peeked out. The enforcers moved methodically, scanners sweeping the air. One paused, its head tilting toward their hiding spot. "We can't wait them out," Reyes whispered. "The array's 2 levels up. If we circle through maintenance, we might—" A low growl echoed from the vents above, cutting her off. Not human. The pack had arrived, slipping through the station's underbelly like shadows. One enforcer spun, firing a burst that lit the corridor in blue plasma. The creature, sleek-scaled with jaws like serrated blades, leapt, tackling the man to the deck in a spray of sparks and blood. Chaos erupted. More growls rippled from the darkness, the pack pouring in. Drawn by the scent of vulnerability, enforcers shouted orders, their line buckling as claws raked armor. Lena fired from cover, her shots precise, dropping one beast mid-leap. "They're using the distraction." "Reyes, go now." She bolted, Mira at her heels, dodging a tumbling enforcer who clutched a gashed arm. The maintenance ladder loomed ahead, its rungs slick with condensation. They climbed, the sounds of battle fading below. Screams, gunfire, the wet snap of jaws. Reyes's arms burned by the time they reached the upper level, the array room just beyond a sealed hatch. Mira hacked the panel, her tools sparking against the lock. "Come on, you bureaucratic junk." The door hissed open, revealing the comms core, a throbbing nexus of cables and holoscreens, data streams flickering like trapped lightning. Reyes slotted the chip, initiating the upload. Progress bars crept forward, agonizingly slow. "It'll take 3 minutes. Cover me?" She nodded, positioning herself at the door, pistol drawn. Below, the fight intensified. Through the grated floor, she glimpsed Lena retreating, her rifle barking as she fell back toward a side corridor. A pack member lunged and she rolled, firing point blank. But they were outnumbered, the enforcers' disciplined fire no match for the beast's feral speed. Alarms wailed anew, station-wide now. The upload hit 50%. Mira glanced back, her face pale. "They're breaking through. We need to—" A vent exploded inward behind them, a pack scout crashing through in a whirl of scales and fury. Mira spun, squeezing off shots that scorched its hide but didn't stop it. It barreled toward Reyes, jaws wide. She yanked a loose cable from the array, sparks flying as she whipped it like a lash. The improvised whip cracked across the creature's eyes, buying a second. Mira finished it with a headshot, the body slumping in a heap of twitching limbs. Creative, she gasped, reloading. But we're out of time. The upload chimed at 90%. Below, Lena's voice crackled over comms. Rhea's enforcers are rallying. Pack's thinning them, get out! She pulled the chip free as the transfer completed. The data broadcasting across neutral channels, exposing the Council's lies in raw, unfiltered bursts. Alerts flashed. Council overrides incoming, but too late. The truth was loose. They descended the ladder in a controlled slide, rejoining Lena in a side passage slick with blood. She was limping, a gash across her thigh sealed with hasty foam. Upload done? Done, Reyes said, pocketing the chip. But the station's locking down. We head for the ship. Emergency evac protocols. The trio pushed through flickering corridors, the pack's howls mingling with enforcer shouts. One beast blocked their path, larger than the others, its eyes glowing. Reyes raised her pistol, the barrel steady despite the tremor in her gut. The beast loomed in the corridor's dim glow, its fur matted with enforcer blood, eyes like twin plasma cutters slicing through the haze. It snarled, lips curling back over fangs that could shear hull plating, and lowered its massive head, muscles rippling under scarred hide. Back up slow, Lena whispered, her voice tight as she gripped the makeshift baton from her belt. A scavenged conduit rod, humming with residual charge. Jax Harlan, the wiry tech from the Pax Edge crew, flanked her, his breather mask fogged from heavy breaths. He clutched a jury-rigged emitter, fingers dancing over the controls. This thing's alpha. Council's modded it for loyalty, won't budge without a fight. The beast lunged, not a full charge but a probing swipe, claws raking the deck and sending sparks flying. Reyes fired twice, the shots cracking like thunder in the confined space. One grazed its shoulder, drawing a yelp, but the second buried in the wall behind. It shook off the hit, advancing with a guttural rumble that vibrated through their boots. Emitter won't hold it long, Jax muttered, thumbing the device. A low-frequency pulse emanated, a ripple in the air that made Reyes's teeth ache. The beast hesitated, ears flattening, but its eyes locked on Lena's limp, predator instinct zeroing in on weakness. She swung the baton without warning, the rod connecting with a crackle against the beast's muzzle. Electricity arced, singeing fur and eliciting a howl that echoed down the passage. Move! It's buying time, not stopping it. They retreated in tandem, Reyes covering their rear while Jax modulated the emitter's whine. The corridor narrowed ahead, conduits twisting like veins in the station's underbelly. Alarms blared faintly now, the lockdown sealing bulkheads one by one. Behind them, enforcer boots pounded, closing the noose. The beast shook its head, dazed but recovering, and barreled forward. The pulse faltered. Jax cursed as the device overheated, its casing blistering his glove. Overload, 10 seconds. Reyes grabbed Lena's arm, hauling her along as they dashed for the junction. Her leg buckled once, foam seal cracking under strain. But she bit down a gasp and pushed on. The beast's roar chased them, claws scraping metal inches from Jax's heel. They spilled into the junction, a wider chamber pulsing with emergency strobes. Vents hissed steam, and a service ladder led upward to the docking bays. But the Alpha was on them, smashing through the narrowing hall like a battering ram. It collided with the wall, dislodging panels that rained debris, but momentum carried it straight at Jax. He dove aside, the emitter skittering across the deck. The beast's paw clipped him, sending him tumbling into a bulkhead with a sickening thud. Blood smeared his mask as he groaned, ribs probably cracked. Jax! Lena spun, ignoring her wound, and snatched up the emitter. It sparked erratically in her hands. Reyes fired again, this time aiming for the eyes. A direct hit to one socket, the beast rearing back in agony, smoke curling from the wound. But it didn't fall. Blind in one eye, it thrashed wildly, tail whipping conduits loose. Sparks ignited a fuel line, flames licking up the wall in a hungry bloom. The junction filled with acrid smoke, visibility dropping to arm's length. Climb! Reyes barked, shoving Lena toward the ladder. She hooked the emitter's strap over her shoulder and started up, one-handed, her free arm pulling with gritted determination. Reyes turned back for Jax, slinging the tech's arm over her neck. On your feet, ship's waiting. Jax nodded weakly, pain etching lines in his face, but he gripped the rungs as Reyes boosted him. Below, the beast circled, sniffing the air, its injured eye weeping fluid. It leaped, jaws snapping at the ladder's base, bending the metal with a groan. Halfway up, Lena twisted, aiming the emitter downward. She cranked it manually, bypassing the failsafe, a human hack overriding the Council's safety protocols. The pulse surged, a deafening wave that rattled the ladder and slammed into the beast like an invisible hammer. It staggered, collapsing in a heap, but not before its claws shredded the lower rungs. The structure held just. They crested the hatch into the access tunnel above, sealing it with a desperate slam. Shudders ran through the deck as enforcers breached the junction below, shouts mingling with the beast's fading growls. Lena slumped against the wall, emitter dying in her lap. That buy us time? Reyes checked her pistol's charge, 2 shots left. Enough to reach the ship. But the pack's scattered now. Council's got the station in a vice. Jax coughed, wiping blood from his lip. Data's out. Truth's spreading. We hold the line. They pressed on through the tunnel's gloom, the distant rumble of the station a grim reminder. Escape was no guarantee, only the next fight. The tunnel narrowed ahead, forcing Reyes to duck under a tangle of exposed conduits that sparked like dying fireflies. She led the way, pistol raised, her breath steady despite the ache in her shoulder from the earlier scramble. Behind her, Lena gripped the emitter's casing, its faint hum the only sound cutting through the oppressive silence. Jax brought up the rear, his steps uneven, favoring the leg where the beast's claw had grazed him. A low vibration hummed through the floor plating, growing insistent. Reyes froze, signaling the others to halt. Hear that? Not enforcers this time. Lena pressed her ear to the wall, eyes narrowing. Pumps. The station's venting atmosphere from the lower decks. If the breach spreads up here, Jax grunted, leaning against the bulkhead. Then we swim or we don't. Ship's 2 junctions away. Move. They pushed forward, the air thickening with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen laced with something acrid. Fuel from ruptured lines, maybe. Reyes spotted the next hatch, its control panel flickering erratically. She punched in the override code from the stolen deck plans, but the light cycled red, denying access. Locked down, she muttered. Council's sealing sections to contain the pack. Or us. Lena knelt, prying open the panel with a shard of metal scavenged from the floor. Wires spilled out like entrails, and she traced them with quick fingers, her cautious nature yielding to necessity. Powers rerouted. Give me a minute. The vibration intensified, now accompanied by a distant hiss, like steam escaping a cracked pipe. Jax shifted, pistol drawn, scanning the shadows behind them. Minute's all we got. Something's stirring back there. Reyes nodded, covering the rear. She could make out faint scuttling now. Not the heavy thud of enforcer boots, but lighter, more erratic. The pack wasn't done. Survivors were regrouping, drawn by the chaos. Her mind raced through options: blast the hatch, risk alerting more, or wait and hope Lena's improvisation held. Sparks flew as Lena twisted 2 cables together, her hands steady, bypassing the seal. It's crude, but the panel lit green, hatch grinding open with a reluctant screech. But as they stepped through, the scuttling resolved into claws on metal, closing fast. Reyes spun, firing a shot down the tunnel. The bolt illuminated a pair of sleek forms, hounds smaller than the brute below but no less lethal, their eyes glowing with feral intelligence. Run, she barked, the word echoing as they bolted into the new corridor. Lena stumbled but caught herself. Emitter clutched like a shield. The corridor branched into a maintenance bay, cluttered with crates and tool racks, salvage from the station's underbelly. Jack slammed the hatch behind them, but it wouldn't latch. The override had jammed it half open. Brace it, Reyes ordered, shoving a crate against the gap. The hounds hit the barrier with a thud, claws scraping through the narrow opening, forcing the metal to buckle. Jax wedged his boot into the frame, pistol barking another shot. One hound yelped, retreating, but the second lunged, its jaws snapping inches from Lena's leg. She swung the emitter, cracking it against the creature's snout. The device whined in protest, its energy field flickering wildly. Get to the far door, Reyes yelled, grabbing a length of pipe from the floor and jamming it through the crate's handles, buying seconds. They dashed across the bay, the air now heavy with the stench of ozone and blood. Lena reached the control for the docking arm first, her fingers dancing over the keys. Ship's prepped, auto-dock engaged, but the vent's pressure is building. We launch now, or the whole arm shears off. The pipe bent with a groan, hounds pouring through as Jax kicked the crate aside and fired his last shot. The bolt grazed the lead beast, sending it tumbling, but the others swarmed. Reyes charged, pipe swinging in wide arcs, driving them back long enough for the hatch to cycle. They piled into the airlock, the outer door sealing just as the pack hit it, denting the reinforced plating. Alarms blared, hull breach imminent, docking clamps releasing. Lena strapped into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the console. The ship lurched free, the station's arm twisting violently below as atmosphere vented in a silent plume. Reyes watched through the viewport, the hounds' forms scattering into the void before the structure buckled. Jack slumped into a jump seat, blood seeping through his pant leg. Data's safe, but the Council's watching every beacon now. Reyes holstered her empty pistol, the weight of pursuit settling in. Then we vanish, deeper into the fringe. The ship accelerated into the black, leaving the station's lights to fade. Up higher for the Council's miscalculation, Lena's fingers danced across the nav console, plotting a jagged course through the asteroid belt that ringed the fringe's outer edge. The ship's engines hummed a low protest, thrusters firing in short bursts to weave between tumbling rocks the size of shuttles. Reyes leaned over her shoulder, her breath steady but eyes sharp, scanning the sensor readouts for any sign of pursuit. Council's got eyes on every relay buoy from here to the core worlds, she said, voice low like she was sharing a secret with the void. We slingshot off that gas giant ahead, lose them in the interference. Jax grunted from the medbay alcove, wrapping fresh bandages around his thigh where the hound's claw had torn through. The painkillers dulled the edge, but not the ache of what they'd left behind. The station's crew vaporized in the breach, all because of that intel dump on the Council's black site ops. Interference won't hide us forever, he muttered, testing his weight on the leg. It buckled once, then held. They'll sniff us out like those mutts. What's the play if they do? The ship shuddered as a micrometeor skimmed the hull, sparks flaring outside the viewport. Lena didn't flinch, adjusting course with a flick. We don't fight, we outrun. Fringe rules, adapt or drift. But even as she said it, the proximity alarm chirped, painting a shadow on the scan. Not Council, but something worse. A derelict freighter half buried in an ice chunk, its emergency beacon pulsing weakly. Pirates, scavengers? In the fringe, the line blurred. Reyes straightened, hand drifting to her holster. Could be a trap. Or salvage we need. Fuel cells are down to 30%. She glanced at Jax, who was already limping forward, grabbing a scanner from the bulkhead. The wound made him move deliberate, each step a reminder of the cost. But his jaw set in that stubborn way, the kind that said he'd crawl through vacuum if it meant getting the data to the resistance contacts on Epsilon Vale. Lena killed the main engines, letting momentum carry them closer. The derelict loomed, its hull scarred by plasma burns, airlock yawning like a wound. No life signs, but the beacon looped a distress call. Automated, garbled, something about containment failure. Jax patched into it, his fingers smudged with blood. Old mining rig. Hit by a fringe storm, maybe. Cargo manifest shows coolant rods. Exactly what we need to mask our heat signature. Or it's bait, Reyes countered, but she was already suiting up, mag boots clanking against the deck. Lena shot her a look, the cautious one she reserved for her bold streaks. I'm coming. Can't trust you two not to blow it up first. Her voice carried that pilot's edge, wry but unyielding, the glue that kept their trio from fraying in the endless black. They cycled through the airlock in tense silence, tethers snaking behind them. The derelict's exterior was a frozen tomb, frost glazing the pitted metal, stars reflecting in sharp prisms. Jax led, scanner humming, his limp translated to a careful float. A loose panel drifted past, bumping Rhea's shoulder. She batted it away, pulse rifle sweeping the shadows. Inside, the corridors twisted like veins, emergency lights flickering red, gravity plates long dead. Their boots thudded softly on the deck as mags engaged. Containment's this way, Jax whispered, voice echoing in the suit comms. They rounded a corner, and the air, stale, preserved, hit them first. Then the sight. A ruptured cryopod, shards of ice scattering like diamonds, and in the center, a figure slumped against the wall. Not dead, but frozen, suit cracked, faceplate webbed with frost. Lena knelt first, her glove brushing the controls. He's alive, barely. Medscanner says human mid-40s. No transponder, fringe drifter. Reyes covered the hall, rifle trained on the dark. We can't play heroes. Grab the rods and go. But Jax was already prying open a nearby locker, pulling out a satchel of coolant vials, his movements efficient despite the pain shooting up his leg. The drifter stirred then, eyes fluttering behind the frost, a weak gasp crackling over open channel. Council. Sent the hounds. Data's in the core. Don't let them... The words hung a spark in the cold. Lena exchanged a glance with Reyes, wary, but the grit in her eyes said they weren't walking away. Jax sealed the satchel, slinging it over his shoulder. He's one of us. Resistance? We thaw him, get his story. Could be the key to dumping this intel without a beacon trail. Alarms wailed suddenly. Not theirs. The derelict systems rebooting, lights surging to life, revealing scrawled warnings on the walls. Quarantine, biohazard. From the vents, a hiss escaped and something skittered in the shadows. Not hounds, but engineered vermin, the Council's failed experiments, eyes glowing with feral hunger. Reyes fired first, the shot echoing like thunder, one creature bursting in a spray of ichor. "Move!" Lena barked, hauling the drifter's arm over her shoulder. They retreated in a scramble, Jax covering rear, his shots precise even as his legs screamed. The ship was a beacon now, thrusters firing hot to pull away, but the vermin swarmed the airlock, claws scraping metal. One latched onto Jax's boot, tearing at the seal. He stomped it free, blood welling inside his suit, but they sealed the inner door just as the outer buckled. Back aboard, Lena punched the engines to life, the ship lurching free of the ice field. The drifter lay on the deck, thawing unevenly, coughs racking. Lena knelt beside the drifter, her gloved hands pressing a stim patch to his neck. The man's skin was mottled blue from the freeze, veins spidering like cracked ice under the surface. He coughed again, a wet rasp that sprayed frost across the deck plating, and his eyes fluttered open, wild, unfocused, locking onto her face. "Easy," she said, voice low. "You're aboard the Epsilon drift. We pulled you from the ice." Jax leaned against the bulkhead, his wounded leg propped on a crate, blood seeping through the hasty bandage. He wiped sweat from his brow, the pain etching lines deeper into his face. "Those shadows, vermin you called them. Council's pets gone rogue. How many more out there?" The drifter's breath steadied, but his gaze darted to the viewport where the ice field receded like a fading nightmare. "Hundreds," he croaked, voice gravelly from disuse. "Engineered for mining ops, but the neural overrides failed. Now they hunt anything warm. Your ship. It's marked. They'll track the heat signature." Reyes holstered her rifle, the echo of those earlier shots still humming in her ears. She paced the cramped med bay, boots thudding softly. Brave to a fault, she always pushed forward, but caution flickered now in her tightened jaw. "We can't outrun them forever. Engines are straining already. Fuel reserves at 30% after that burn." Lena stood, stripping off her gloves with a snap. The air recyclers hummed, pulling the chill from the room, but tension hung thicker. She glanced at Jax, his wit dulled by exhaustion, then back to the drifter. "You know this system." "Ex-council operative?" He nodded faintly, propping himself up on an elbow. "Name's Harlan, cartographer. Got stranded when the outpost fell. Vermin tore through the habdomes like paper. If we head for the asteroid belt, we might lose them in the debris field. But it's risky. Magnetic storms could fry our nav systems." Jack snorted, wincing as he shifted. "Risky, we're already dancing with death. Better than waiting for claws on the hull." His fingers drummed the crate, mind already spinning improvised fixes. He'd patched worse on frontier runs, human grit turning scrap into salvation. Reyes stopped pacing, eyes narrowing. Belt's 2 hours out at full thrust, but if they board again... She trailed off, the memory of ichor spraying vivid. One wrong move, and the ship became a tomb. "Prep the countermeasures," Lena ordered, decisive as ever. Her cautious nature balanced the group's fire, always weighing the odds before leaping. Jax, rig the auxiliary vents to vent plasma bursts, scare them off like flares. Reyes, seal all external access. Harlan, plot the course. We adapt or we die. The drifter, Harlan, tapped a flickering console, his thawing fingers clumsy but sure. Coordinates bloomed on the screen, a jagged path through the rocks. The ship groaned as Lena punched the throttles, acceleration pinning them to their seats. Outside, the ice shards thinned, giving way to the void's black maw. Jax worked fast in the engineering crawlspace, sweat beading despite the cold. He jury-rigged conduits with salvaged wiring, his hands steady even as pain lanced his leg. "This'll give him a hot surprise," he muttered, testing the circuit. A spark jumped, illuminating his determined grin. Alarms blared suddenly, proximity alerts. Reyes rushed to the bridge, scanning the scopes. "They're gaining. Pack of 20 at least, silhouetted against the stars. Closing fast." Harlan's face paled. "The Queen. Bigger one leads them, if she latches on. Lena gripped the controls, veering sharply. The ship shuddered, inertial dampers whining. Hold course. Jax. Status? Online in 30, came the terse reply over comms. Tools clattered in the background, a rhythm of defiance. The vermin swarmed closer, their glowing eyes dots of malice in the dark. One skimmed the hull, claws screeching, a sound that vibrated through the deck like nails on bone. Reyes fired, point defense lasers from the turret, bursts of light carving two from the void but more pressed in. They're adapting, Harlan said, voice tight. Learning our patterns. Tension coiled as the asteroid belt loomed, a graveyard of tumbling stone. Lena threaded the needle, dodging boulders that filled the view screen like avalanches. The ship bucked, a near miss shearing off an antenna with a metallic wail. Jax's voice crackled. Vent ready. Fire on your mark. Now! Lena barked. Plasma erupted from the sides, superheated bursts blooming like artificial suns. The vermin recoiled, several incinerated in the glare, their forms twisting in agony. The queen veered, screeching silently through the vacuum, her brood scattering into the rocks. But victory bit back. A stray bolt clipped the engine nacelle, alarms screaming hull breach. Jax cursed from below, smoke billowing. Containment failing. Rerouting power, but we're limping. Rhea slumped in her chair, the cost settling in. Fuel low, systems strained, and the belt's storms crackling ahead. Harlan watched the scopes, the Queen's signature fading but not gone. Lena exhaled, steadying the ship. They had bought time, forged survival from desperation. But the shadows lingered, a promise of hunts yet to come. Jax gripped the manual override, sweat stinging his eyes as the ship shuddered through the asteroid's shadow. The Queen's silhouette flickered on the scopes, closing in like a predator scenting blood. Reyes, she's adapting, flanking us from the debris field. Those bursts won't hold her off much longer. Reyes nodded, her fingers dancing over the flickering console, rerouting what scraps of power remained. The engine's whine pitched higher, protesting the strain, but the hull held, for now. Harlan leaned forward, eyes narrowed at the tactical overlay. We can't outrun her. Fuel's at critical. Lena, what's our best shot at the storm front? Lena's hand steadied on the yoke, her voice calm amid the chaos. 2 minutes to the plasma storms. If we thread the needle, we might lose her in the interference. But one wrong drift. She trailed off, the implication hanging heavy. The belt's tempests crackled ahead, veils of ionized gas that could fry sensors or shield them from pursuit. A jolt rocked the deck, alarms blaring as tendrils from the Queen lashed out, scoring the shields. Sparks flew from a panel and Jax ducked, cursing under his breath. Shields at 30%. She's testing us, wearing us down. He slammed, a fist on the bulkhead, the vibration traveling up his arm like a reminder of their fragility. These vermin weren't mindless. They learned, evolved in the void's unforgiving school. Reyes wiped her brow, pulling up schematics on her cracked display. Early plans toast. Can't vent plasma without venting ourselves. But her eyes lit up, tracing lines of conduits. The auxiliary thrusters, jury-rig them to the waste recyclers. Force a burst of crystallized exhaust, it'll act like chaff, confuse her brood. Harlan snorted, but there was no mockery in it, just the grit of shared desperation. Crazy enough to work. You're talking human voodoo, Reyes, let's do it. He unstrapped, grabbing a toolkit from the overhead locker, his movements precise despite the ship's lurching. Lena banked hard, dodging a tumbling rock that gleamed with frost in the dim light. They worked in tandem, Jax feeding instructions from the lower deck while Harlan welded hasty connections. The air grew thick with ozone and the acrid tang of melting insulation. Seal it, now, Reyes barked as the first test vented, a plume of glittering particles erupting from the stern. The scopes lit up with false signatures, the brood scattering like startled fish. But the Queen pressed on, her form swelling against the stars, a leviathan uncoiling. A claw raked the ventral plating, breaching a compartment with a deafening groan. Air whistled out, carrying tools and debris into the black. Harlan hauled Jax back from the edge, their boots scraping metal. "We're not done yet," Harlan growled, sealing the tear with an emergency patch that bubbled under the cold. Lena pushed, the engines, the ship groaning as it plunged toward the storms. Lightning arced across the viewport, bathing the bridge in erratic blue. The Queen veered, her screeches lost to vacuum, but her pursuit didn't falter. Reyes monitored the chaff's decay, her face gaunt in the glow. "It's buying seconds, not minutes. We need more." Inspiration struck Jax like a spark in the dark. From below, his voice crackled over the comm. "The mining charges, we've got 2 left from the prospect run. Detonate them in sequence behind us. Turn the debris into a kill zone." It was reckless, turning their salvage tools into a trap, but it was theirs. Human stubbornness forged in the fires of necessity. Harlan rigged the deployment, his hand steady as he armed the devices. "On your mark, Captain." Reyes gave the nod and Lena fired the retros, the ship twisting through the first storm tendril. Charges bloomed in their wake, shattering asteroids into shrapnel clouds that pelted the Queen's flank. She recoiled, bioluminescence flaring in rage, but chunks of her carapace sheared away, trailing ichor that froze in glittering trails. The brood fragmented, signals winking out one by one. Yet the cost mounted. A secondary explosion clipped their port side, shearing an antenna and spiking radiation warnings. Lena fought the controls, sweat beading on her forehead, as the ship limped deeper into the maelstrom. They emerged on the far side, scopes clear at last. The Queen's signature dimmed, retreating to nurse her wounds in the belt's depths. Reyes slumped back, the bridge silent save for the hum of strained systems. Harlan clapped Jax on the shoulder. When he climbed up, a ghost of a smile breaking through. Damage reports scrolled. Engines offline for repairs, supplies halved, a crew member lost in the breach. Peterson gone without a word. The void stared back, indifferent. But they flew on, scarred and unbowed. Lena eased the throttles forward, the engines groaning back to life under Jax's jury-rigged patches. The bridge lights flickered, casting long shadows across the consoles where Reyes nursed a bandaged arm, her face etched with the kind of exhaustion that came from too many close calls. Harlan stood at the viewport, arms crossed, watching the asteroid belt recede like a fading nightmare. "Scans clear," Jax announced from his station, his voice steady despite the grease smudged on his cheek. "No pursuit signatures. Queen's brood is scattering, but they're not following." Reyes nodded, wincing as she shifted. "Good, plot a course for the relay point. We need to report this before the Council writes us off as another ghost ship." Lena glanced at her hands still tight on the controls. The ship shuddered once, a final protest from the hull breaches they'd sealed with whatever foam and prayers they had left. Peterson's station sat empty, its screen dark, a hole in the team that no repair could fill. She'd heard his last shout over the comms, cut short by the vacuum's roar. Brave fool, charging the auxiliary to buy them seconds. Harlan broke the silence, turning from the viewport. Council's intel called this manageable. Manageable like a hive full of pissed-off wasps. His laugh was rough, devoid of humor, but it cut the tension like a knife through fog. Jack snorted, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "Yeah, and their obituary's gonna read mistake. We punched above our weight, Harlan. Humans don't fold." The ship accelerated, stars streaking into lines as they broke free of the belt's gravity well. Alarms pinged softly. Radiation levels dropping, but life support strained from the lost seals. Supplies would stretch thin on the long haul back. Rationing faces, cutting corners on sleep. Reyes had already volunteered for double shifts, her cautious nature yielding to the grit that bound them. Lena felt the pull of it all, the weight of choices made in the dark. She'd flown straight into the maelstrom on Reyes's order, trusting Jax's mad scramble to reroute power when the engines failed. Harlan's quick thinking with the decoy flares had drawn the brood's fire just long enough. Teamwork, raw and unpolished, had turned the tide. But the cost lingered. A scar on the hull. A ghost in the crew quarters. Questions from the Council that might end careers. "Relay in range," Jack said, fingers dancing over keys. The burst transmission fired off, coordinates, losses, the Queen's retreat. No embellishments. The data would speak for itself. Reyes leaned back, eyes closing briefly. "We made it. That's what matters." Harlan clapped Jax's shoulder again, firmer this time. "Damn right. Next time they send a fleet. The ship hummed onward, a battered arrow piercing the void. They endured.